Let's talk about what's just happened in American politics and the task ahead for a second Obama administration with the journalist and activist Eamon McCann, the writer and broadcaster Malachy O'Doherty, Christine Todd Whitman, former Republican governor of New Jersey, head of the Environmental Protection Agency under George W. Bush. She's also the author of It's My Party Too. And Sean Hillen, the National Public Relations Director for Democrats Abroad Ireland, the official overseas wing of the US Democratic Party. You're all very welcome. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Sequence.
Good morning.
Let me start with you, Sean. I suppose you're still celebrating.
Yes, someone supplied me with a little drop of poachine up here in West Donegal, and I've been nipping little bits of it here and there. It was a good victory, both the popular vote and the electoral college vote was 332 to 206, including Florida, which, as you know, came in
just last night. Yeah.
So it was not as close as was predicted. I think a message has been sent by the voters of the United States that they trust President Obama, that he's been quite consistent, and that the economic mess was, in effect, created by the previous Republican government. So I think really it strengthens President Obama's hand, and I think the Republicans are really doing a lot of internal analysing of what went wrong for the party. And I do think that after this lame duck session is finished, President Obama should be able to move ahead if there is less obstructionism from the Republicans with some of the policies he was unable to put into force in the first 4 years.
Well, that's the question many people are asking. What is the message of this election for the Republican Party? How does it need to change? If it does, can it change in order to keep up with the changing demographics of the United States? Christine Todd Whitman, Governor Whitman, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think the message is?
Well, the message I thought was quite clear. I mean, first of all, I would back it up a little bit. What everything said is that people, with Obama's re-election, what people were saying is he understands me. But all the polls were showing that as far as who could solve the economic problems, they said Romney probably has a better handle on that. I think they were disappointed in the president's walking away from the Simpson Bowles, which was a bipartisan commission he put forward he put it together to address the fiscal issues. They came up with a proposal that was bipartisan, not unanimous, but bipartisan, but it had some pretty tough measures in it. Everybody was going to have to give, and unfortunately it took presidential leadership to get that moving, and he walked away from that. Hopefully with a second term he will come back at that, because that's what we've got to do. For the Republicans, it's pretty clear to me. You cannot be an all-white male party and hope to be relevant in the United States nationally. It's not going to work. You cannot keep, we as Republicans cannot keep saying, I don't like you and I don't like you, and if you're not with me 100%, I'm not going to pay any attention to you. We have got to go after women. We lost those by over 11%, and they were better than 51% of the overall electorate. We lost Hispanics by over 40%, and they are rapidly becoming the primary voter target in the United States. Of course, the African-American vote was overwhelming, and I doubt Republicans will ever win that, but we shouldn't lose it by 90%. These are statistics that tell you what you need to do, and it's a question of whether those who are analyzing it, instead of just coming back and saying, well, Mitt Romney wasn't conservative enough, they take the deep breath and say, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with being conservative. There's nothing wrong with the base, so-called. They're not enough, and we have got to do more to reach out to people.
And one of the stellar statistics we learned this week was 50,000 new Hispanic voters every month in the United States. 50,000 turning 18 years old, and therefore tipping the balance on some social issues like immigration, perhaps, or the future of Puerto Rico, or many other issues to do with social and moral questions. Christine. And we now see that the Catholic vote for Obama held pretty well. It dropped a little bit, but it held pretty well. Jewish vote held very well as well. What do you analyse? How do you analyse the religious and moral landscape that's changing in the States? Well,
the very interesting thing amongst the Hispanic voters is you've got a lot of very devout Catholics in that group. And again, what I've always maintained is even those who are pro-life and do not believe in abortion, when you start to peel back that onion, they'll say, well, okay, rape or incest, that's one thing. Life health of the mother, that's something. You can find areas where you agree they're not hard line, and the Republican Party took a hard line, even though even though Mitt Romney said he believed in an abortion in the case of rape and incest, he had other members of his party making very strong statements that they were against that, and also going after an organization such as Planned Parenthood, whose main mission is not to provide abortion counseling. It is to provide basic health care for women, particularly in areas where they have no other access, where the local governments are not providing it. And most women, even those who are pro-life, are saying, no, wait a minute, that's going too far. So it's a question of finding that balance that isn't as hard-edged as it has been, because even within the Hispanic community, there's certainly a great deal of room for inroads, and a lot of them are small business owners. Republicans have traditionally been the party of small business. They've been the party that said, we want entrepreneurs, we want to get government out of your everyday life, we want to let you have the opportunity to succeed. But Republicans have to understand they have also got to live up to their end of it, which is you can't keep taxes low if you don't balance budgets. You've got to control spending, and that's a challenge both parties have to meet, because they're equally bad on that.
Well, there's some of the domestic issues that Americans were voting on. Of course, everyone in the rest of the world tends to think of foreign policy issues, but Americans are voting on the economy, on other issues that matter to their lives. Amy McCann, do you think a second Obama administration will make any difference to the rest of the world?
Well, if you're asking about the U.S. foreign policy, it'll make a lot less difference than some of the more euphoric supporters of Mr. Obama appear still to imagine. You remember that 4 years ago it was widely believed, mainly because he kept saying it, that an Obama administration would close Guantanamo Bay, so would have a less aggressive and jagged-edged foreign policy generally. And there was a widespread expectation among people who have been campaigning against and throwing up their hands in horror about the Bush administration that there would be some sort of dramatic change. Of course, there wasn't. And we know now that Barack Obama, in terms of the use of drones, in other countries, against countries with which the United States is not at war, is increasing as the technological capability to use drone warfare increases. That kidnap, rendition, torture, the murder, including murder of American citizens abroad on the direct orders of the president, that is continuing. And
though I've noticed Damon, some ethics commentators saying actually drone warfare could actually lead to fewer deaths. It actually might be more morally justified than other kinds of warfare. Yeah.
Well, most times in history when there's been advances in the technology of war, this has been advertised as the moral choice. The fact of the matter is that if you sit in an office or at a control console in the United States and you guide bombs onto targets identified by people on the ground half a world away, not only do you have no real idea, or can you have no real confidence of who it is that you're actually killing, but you also distance the act of killing from the death itself. And I find it chilling. I think that this idea sort of a video game war, is absolutely appalling. What it mainly does, when you say sort of that there'll be fewer people killed, I'm not sure that that's true, because a lot of these drone strikes are in places where ground forces cannot and could not go in. There's a cowardly element to it in that way, cowardly element of the high-tech people. It reminds me of, sort of what was it Chester or Belloc, I forget which one, who said sort of about the Sudan, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. That's the attitude, and it's contemptible, and it's Barack Obama's.
Malachy O'Doherty has been speaking about some of the other aspects of this election and the danger of rhetoric, actually, within a political context like this, Malachy.
Well, you see, I think Eamon is right on his observations on foreign policy. Others are right on their observations on how he manages the economy. But you wonder how much the ordinary voter, and particularly the swing voter, understands these. Watching Obama after the election in particular, on really awesome form as an orator. And right enough for
he found himself again.
He found himself again, and yet oratory doesn't win elections in itself. But there we were looking at this megastar saying banal, generalised things that were not very specific.
A kind of version of an evangelical sermon with a personal narrative and a testimony at the centre of it.
Yeah, and others have done the same. It goes back to Kennedy. In some ways, he was even using language very similar to Kennedy's when he talked about the responsibility that you have to the state and so on. But But that's my fear. This is my fear, that this is the politics, where the politics of show business. This is what we saw in Blair. It's what we saw in Clinton. It's what we saw in Reagan. It's what we saw in Kennedy. It is a really awesome performer, no doubt about it. But if we are to love this man, and many clearly do, and are to be swayed by him simply by the power of his oratory and his personal charm, then it's not the drones that are going to be weighed in the balance, and it's not even going to be the economic policy that's weighed in the balance.
Did you care who would win this election?
Oh, I did. I mean, I personally, to the degree that it doesn't influence. Well, it does in the sense that I'm a citizen of the world, I suppose. But I didn't have a vote on it. I obviously prefer Obama to Romney. That comes easy to me. But do I trust Obama? Do I think that Obama couldn't get one over on me with his charm? Do I trust Obama not to get involved in a war with Iran in the next year? To support Israel? I don't. I think that may very well happen. Do I trust him to secure the negotiations in the middle ground on the economy with the Republicans that will keep America and therefore the rest of us out of recession? Well, I don't know. He'll not pull that off with a smile.
Sean Hillen?
I think that if one considers the alternative, and that is that there are more hawkish people behind Romney, many of which were around George Bush. People like Karl Rove, who was linked to the revelation of the CIA agent Valerie Plame because her husband spoke out against the Iraq War. If we think of the caliber of people who could now be advising America's foreign policy, it is quite frightening. I do think, even because of his biracial background, I do believe that President Obama has a greater understanding and a greater belief in dialogue and in negotiation than in military warfare. If one also considers that the major oil companies and major military manufacturing companies would be supporting Romney, one also has to believe that military thinking might be more to the fore than I do believe it is within the Democratic Party. So these reasons indicate to me that absolutely President Obama is the best person to lead a more peaceful and stable policy for the next 4 years.